Welcome to the annual meeting for American Battery Technology Company. Our host for today's call is Christine Amrine, representative of American Election Services. At this time, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. I will now turn the call over to your host, Christine Amrine. You may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Christine Amrine, and I am a representative of American Election Services. The company has appointed me to act as Inspector of Election. This meeting was originally scheduled on November 16th, and it was adjourned due to an apparent lack of quorum. Upon review of the meeting, the company's provider, Broadridge Financial Solutions, identified its error at no fault of American Battery Technology Company in the tabulation. Once Broadridge rectified the error, the company achieved quorum. Broadridge has taken steps to ensure that proper checks are in place to prevent any future recurrence. I would like to now turn the meeting over to Ryan Melsert, CEO of American Battery Technology Company.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the 2023 Annual Meeting of Stockholders of the American Battery Technology Company. My name is Ryan Melsert, and I am the Chief Executive Officer, Chief Technology Officer, and a member of the Board of Directors of the company, and I will act as the chairperson of this meeting. Thank you for joining us today. We're excited to be hosting our virtual meeting, which allows us to be more inclusive and reach a greater number of our stockholders. As is our custom, we will conduct the business portion of our meeting first and answer questions at the end of the meeting. Though we may not be able to answer every question, we will do our best to provide a response to as many as possible. In keeping with the digital approach to this year's meeting, it is now shortly after 1:30 p.m. Pacific on December 12, 2023, and this meeting is officially called to order. I would now like to introduce the other members of the board and of our ABTC executive team at today's meeting. At this time, I would like to recognize the following members of the board at today's meeting: Julie Blunden, Rick Fazell, Beth Lowry, and Sharif Marakbe. I would also like to introduce the members of the ABTC executive team: Jesse Deutsch, our Chief Financial Officer, Scott Jolkover, our Chief Mineral Resource Officer, and Andres Meza, our Chief Operations Officer. Next, I would like to introduce Brett Mage, our General Counsel and Company Secretary, who will act as Secretary of this meeting. Brett, would you please address some of the other formalities relating to this meeting?
Thank you, Ryan. Certain formalities are required to convene this meeting, after which the matters stated in the notice of this meeting and in the proxy statement that you received shall be addressed. I will include the oath of the Inspector of Election and the reports of the Inspector of Election when completed regarding the quorum and voting in the minutes of this meeting. After the formal meeting has been adjourned, we will provide time for general questions. Only validated stockholders may ask questions in the designated field on the web portal. Out of consideration for others, please limit yourself to one question. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. However, no one attending via the webcast or telephone is permitted to use any audio recording device. I also want to remind everyone that statements or comments made today may be forward-looking statements. Forward-looking statements may include, but are not necessarily limited to, financial projections or other statements of the company's plans, objectives, expectations, or intentions. These matters involve certain risks and uncertainties. The company's actual results may differ significantly from those projected or suggested due to a variety of factors that are discussed in detail in our SEC filings. The Board of Directors fixed September 19, 2023 as the record date for determining stockholders entitled to vote at this meeting. An affidavit has been delivered attesting to the fact that either 1, a notice of intent of internet availability of the notice of the meeting, the proxy statement, and the 2023 annual report to stockholders, or 2, the documents themselves were mailed on or about October 6, 2023, to all stockholders as of the record date and will be incorporated into the minutes of this meeting. The stockholder list shows that, as of the record date, there were 46,139,014 shares of common stock outstanding and entitled to vote at this annual meeting. We are informed by the Inspector of Election that there are represented in person or by proxy shares of common stock representing 27,092,064 votes, or approximately 58% of the voting power on the record date. Because this represents more than a third of the voting power of all issued and outstanding stock entitled to vote on the record date, a quorum is present for the purposes of transacting business. Now I will present the matters to be voted on. We will address any questions you may have regarding the business of the company later in the program. Proposal 1 is the election of directors. The current board has nominated Ryan Melsert, Elizabeth Lowry, Julie Blunden, Rick Fazell, and Sharif Marakbi for election of as directors to hold office until the next annual meeting of stockholders or until their successors are duly elected and qualified. And Proposal 2 is to ratify the appointment of Marcum LLP as the company's independent registered public accounting firm for the year ending June 30th, 2024. It is 1:36 Pacific Time on December 12th, 2023, and the polls are now open. Any stockholder who hasn't yet voted or wishes to change their vote may do so by clicking on the voting button on the web portal and following the instructions there. Stockholders who have sent in proxies or voted via telephone or internet and do not want to change their vote do not need to take any further action. I will now pause and wait for stockholders to vote or to change their vote. Now that everyone has had the opportunity to vote, I now declare the polls closed. We have been informed by the Inspector of Election that the preliminary vote report shows the nominees for election to the board have been duly elected and the appointment of Marcum LLP as our independent registered public accounting firm for the year ending June 30th, 2024 has been approved. We will be reporting the final vote results on a Form 8-K to be filed within 4 business days.
Thank you, Brett. I hereby accept the report and certification, and I declare that the resolutions proposed and voted on by the stockholders have been approved. Now we will give a brief presentation on the status of the company, followed by our question and answer session. So we at American Battery Technology Company are working to address the domestic critical supply challenges that we are experiencing. We're seeing this in 3 independent avenues, as right now we have over 20 battery gigafactories under construction in the U.S. We unfortunately have very little manufacturing supply domestically for the metals that are needed to feed these factories. As of now, for each of the metals needed, the lithium, the nickel, the cobalt, the manganese, less than 1% of the global capacity of each of those metals are within the U.S. This presents a severe security of supply challenge for the domestic companies building these very large multi-billion-dollar gigafactories that need to source these metals and unfortunately now need to source them almost 100% from abroad. This also has an impact on the cost of supply of these materials. By having to produce in foreign countries, many of which who have export tariffs on these materials, then having to have them be transferred from different continents to the U.S., increase the cost of supply for these domestic factories. And third of all, the environmental impact of sourcing these metals from countries with different types of environmental regulations that we have in the U.S., and the added impact of shipping these materials abroad makes for a much larger environmental impact for sourcing these materials from outside the U.S. Any one of these three challenges would be enough to justify this business, and having all three of us behind us as tailwinds is a very unique circumstance for us to be able to move forward. So we at ABTC, in order to address these challenges, have three independent business units. We have designed and have implemented a commercial-scale lithium-ion battery recycling technology that allows us to take different types of material waste and defects from within the U.S., in addition to end-of-life materials, to be able to process those in an efficient manner to recover many different products that we can purify back to battery-grade quality and to sell back into the domestic industry. This means that independent of where the material originally came from, whether domestic or abroad, once it's used once with this efficient system, we can keep the materials within the U.S. near indefinitely. While closing the loop is very important, because the number of batteries in the field is growing so quickly, we also have to fill that loop the first time. Up until now, we've mostly been filling that loop with imported material of relatively high cost and relatively high environmental impact. To address this, we have designed a new technology for how to access the lithium resource specifically within US-based materials. So while most lithium today is made from conventional resources, such as hard rock materials mostly in West Australia, or lithium-rich brines mostly in South America, we've identified a new type of resource in the US, a sedimentary claystone resource, that until recently has not been accessed in order to make a lithium product that is purified to battery grade and is made at an economically competitive manner. We've proved this process out over the past 3 years, initially at bench scale and at pilot, and are now moving forward with commercial scale facilities. The combination of making a commercial scale lithium hydroxide refinery directly in the US with commercializing our battery recycling technologies allow us to provide commercial scale quantities of these critical battery materials to help to source these more than 20 battery gigafactories under construction right now. We're very proud of the team we've brought on over the past few years. We go all the way from having our own internal R&D and material scientists to engineering and procurement and construction and operations of our own facilities. This gives us a very large breadth of design to have control over such a wide portion of our design chain in-house that allows us to move forward very efficiently and quickly and at low cost to go from these very fundamental technologies to move them through bench scale and piloting and commercialization. It's very rare for a company to have both battery recycling and primary lithium manufacturing within one unit. We see it as a very similar skill set of individuals that are needed to develop both technologies, the same skill set to construct and operate the type of facilities, to make very similar products, and to sell those products to the same customers. It gives us a great source of strength to be able to sell a wide breadth of materials from a recycling unit, and also to be able to make large quantities of material through our primary lithium hydroxide manufacturing. We're excited to have won several corporate awards over the past few years, as well as several government grants that have supported our commercialization efforts. It really is a rare business unit to have both of these units under one umbrella and to have such a wide breadth of employees that go from the very basic design through construction and all the way up to operating our own facilities. We're excited within the past year to have gone into commercialization on both our first battery recycling facility and on the commercial construction scale design of our lithium hydroxide refinery. As we look back over the past year, we see 10 highlights that we think have been very important in how we have hit milestones and been able to move this company forward. During these annual meetings, we feel it's important to reflect on what we've done over the past year to understand what has gone well, and then at the end of this presentation, we'll discuss what we think are the 10 most important steps that we plan to take over the coming year. We started off by acquiring an existing facility to implement the first train for our commercial scale battery recycling plant. We were in the process of constructing our own ground-up design for this building to then implement this technology. It was very fortuitous that this facility, relatively near our own property, came up for sale. This is an existing building with already installed infrastructure, with many existing permits that was already designed for similar operations. We were able to move into this facility in the spring to save at least 6 months of time in bringing our first operating facility online and to significantly reduce costs, as back in the spring when we were still in the global supply chain crunch. Sourcing materials and components and equipment had severe cost and lead time concerns. Moving into an existing facility greatly sped that up, reduced our costs, and allowed us to get into operations this fall. So this was an unexpected or unplanned opportunity that, looking backwards, we're very happy that we were able to execute on. This has allowed us to get to operations in our facility much sooner than we expected, and to now have our commercial scale products being manufactured directly in this plant. As we moved into October last year, we were very proud to have been selected for a government grant to take the designs for our bench scale system for the manufacturing of this battery-grade lithium hydroxide from our claystone resource, and to now move this into a commercial scale design. So this grant was for a $115 million project to build what will be one of the first lithium mines and lithium refineries constructed in the U.S. in decades. This will support a refinery that will initially make about 30,000 tons per year of battery-grade lithium hydroxide. Since being selected for this grant, we've gone through negotiations and contracting in the spring and summer, have this now contract in hand, and kicked off this project on September 1st. So as we speak to many of the very large automotive OEMs and cell manufacturers and cathode refiners, they are constantly emphasizing how few opportunities there are for them to source battery-grade lithium hydroxide from within the U.S., and especially at this quantity. So we're excited to have many interested parties for the long-term offtake and purchase of the product that we'll be making out of this plant. In the spring, we interviewed many of the premier construction firms throughout the world, had a formal bid process for who we thought would be best to work with, not just as a contractor, but in this multi-year effort, bringing these refineries on scale. Who would be our best partner going forward? After much diligence, we were excited to select Black & Veatch as our engineering, procurement, and construction firm to be our partner in this process as we move forward. We've had great interactions with them so far as we've gone through many of the construction designs and are looking forward to bringing this refinery to reality with them. In November, we were proud to have been selected for another Department of Energy grant, this one to support our battery recycling business unit. There are many planned recycling facilities in the U.S., and there are different types of business strategies of how you can have more of a simple legacy technology that you try to get large scale very quickly. We've seen some other companies in this industry work this route to try to build very large facilities of mature but legacy technology and really just focus on the throughput. We at ABTC take a different approach, where we believe that technology development is extremely important, that as battery technologies are changing on a constant basis, the types of recycling technologies need to change with them. So through this grant, we discussed several of our next generation technologies that are still at the R&D level, that through the support of the government here, we will move through bench scale optimization, piloting, and then build commercial scale versions of these subsystems to keep improving our baseline recycling plant, to make sure that it stays competitive and stays up to technology as we move these forward in time. In February, we were excited to present the initial results of our first 2 drill programs, these that we conducted on our property in Tonopah Flats in Central Nevada. This was our maiden resource report, the first time we had reported the data and analytics about the resource we actually house at this property. This type of lithium-bearing sedimentary claystone is relatively new to be assessed for manufacturing battery-grade lithium products. And while having a technology to access the material is important, actually having large quantities of the feed material itself is equally important. We were very excited when we had our external auditor come in and act as a qualified person and publish in the spring that just on our own property, we have over 15 million tons of lithium on a carbon equivalent basis that can be accessed economically through our technology. This would make it one of the largest lithium resources in the country, and when combined with the technology we have to build this refinery, makes a very compelling case for how we can move this project forward and how to start producing commercial scale quantities of battery-grade lithium hydroxide domestically. As one of the midpoint in our technology milestones, we've also been designing and building a multi-ton per day pilot plant that proves out this technology at the mid-size scale. This project is supported by a different Department of Energy grant that we were awarded 2 years ago. As a 3-year project, the midway point that we went through this spring was essentially a go, no-go check by the U.S. government, looking at the results of our bench scale work, of our integrated systems modeling, and of the actual lithium hydroxide product that we've been manufacturing at our laboratory. As we showed those results and showed the technology that we've developed and the economics of this process, we are proud to have received approval to move into the second half of this program. That included the purchasing of all of the components for this pilot plant, which have now been completed, and we're going through the process of the installation and commissioning of this multi-ton per day system at our facility near Reno. Over the next few months, we'll have this pilot plant operating at steady state and making large quantities of battery-grade lithium hydroxide material. Many of our prospective customers are looking forward to the commissioning of this pilot plant as we generate large quantities of material to send to them for qualification processes and to demonstrate the benefits of using this material as opposed to their other alternatives. For our recycling plant, as we commission the first portion of the facility, we have many intermediate grade materials that we initially make as we bring additional components online to ramp up to making battery grade components within this facility. Back in the spring, we were able to secure a prepayment for the sale of these intermediate materials that we'll be making until the next phase of our plant comes online. So we're excited to have won the support of this customer to sign this marketing agreement with them to help receive funds early on to build out the rest of the facility and to have the access of this instrument to sell these intermediate products into the market until we bring the next phase of our system online. We've worked with BASF for many years. We were proud to initially have won the Circular Challenge they hosted back at the end of 2019. As one of the only companies in the world that makes commercial scale quantities of active cathode material within the U.S., they're the ideal partner for us to work with as we move forward. They have been doing much vetting of the battery recycling industry within North America, trying to find the ideal company to partner with as they scale up their cathode operations in order to find a corresponding party to ramp up their own recycling operations. Over the summer, we were very proud to work with them and to hear that they had selected ABTC to be their recycling partner for all of North America. So through this agreement, we are receiving battery material waste directly from BASF and also from many of their customers, processing this material in our recycling facility, and then selling the recycled products directly back to BASF for them to then be making recycled content cathode material to sell back to their customers in a closed-loop supply chain. Many people talk about closed-loop supply chains in the U.S. and globally. This is one of the first actual implementations of a commercial closed-loop chain operating with the U.S., and we're very proud to be working with the partners to go beyond talking about these supply chains and actually moving commercial-scale quantities of material to start addressing these critical material challenges. At the end of the summer, we performed our third exploratory drill program at our property in Tonopah. This really allows us to have infill drilling to increase the classification of the resource we've already explored, and also step-out drilling to explore additional properties of our land that we have there. We completed this program a few months ago, have received the data back from all of this drilling now, and in the very near term, we'll be publishing an updated report that shows the results of this third drill program and how it can both increase the total size of the resource and also the classification of the material. Just a few months ago in October, we officially commissioned and started operations at our battery recycling plant. So from moving in this facility at the end of April to go into actual operations in October was a very quick turnaround. This is one of the perks of having an in-house R&D and engineering and procurement and construction teams that really allow us to move forward very quickly in-house. The plant is operating as we ramp through the throughput of this system, and we'll continue to ramp operations over the coming months. We were proud to have making the step to list on the NASDAQ exchange a few months ago. This is a big enabler that allows us to work with much larger strategic partners, much larger investors, and to make it easier to transact as we move forward with our current shareholders. This really allows us to access the global equity markets, where as we continue to grow our business units, to be able to work with much larger partners to help facilitate this growth. So those were our 10 leading milestones over the past year, but it's also important to look ahead. So as we look at the coming year, the goals we have as a company are really to publish the updated preliminary economic assessment, including the data from our third drill program we just completed. We'll then also be including an updated resource report that really includes that data itself and shows the implications of this third drill program. We'll be commissioning and starting operations of that multi-ton per day lithium hydroxide pilot plant to show how that functions with our own in-house claystone sedimentary material. We have many expressions of interest from large strategics who want to purchase a long-term offtake of the type of lithium hydroxide we're making of our Tonopah Flats process. We'll be moving forward with those strategics over the next few months to decide who we want to work with to sign that long-term offtake purchase agreement. We'll be completing a fourth drill program down at our Tonopah Flats property to continue to expand and evolve the classification of that resource. Afterwards, we're moving into a preliminary feasibility study, which really shows that updated resource, as well as the updated economic case for how we move forward with the scale-up and commercialization of that process. We're happy to have signed the partnership agreement with BASF, and over the coming year, we'll continue to implement on it to work with themselves and to work with their customers to increase the throughput of the material we have through that process. We'll be bringing online the next phase of our battery recycling facility, which allows us to produce these higher value-add battery cathode grade metals to sell into the market. These are the critical materials that are really in extremely short supply within the US. And as these more than 20 battery gigafactories come online, there is near infinite demand for these types of domestic critical materials. We'll be going through site selection for our next commercial scale battery recycling facility that we plan to build in a co-located fashion with partners as we move forward and develop these strategic relationships about how to better scale up these facilities globally. And we'll continue the permitting and construction of the commercial scale lithium hydroxide refinery at our Tonopah Flats project. This is an extremely large effort to build one of the largest refineries in the US and to make some of the only battery-grade lithium hydroxide at scale within the US itself. So those are some of the highlights of what we've done over the past year and what we plan to do over the coming year. So at this point, we will open the line up for questions from members of the audience. and we'll provide responses to as many of those as we can.
All right, Ryan, I have a first question here for you if you're ready to answer. There are other lithium-ion battery recyclers that have recently made public statements that they are not able to move forward with the construction and implementation of their facilities. What makes ABTC different from these other recyclers, and how are we moving forward with our commercial scale recycling facilities?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think a key differentiator is, again, having an in-house team that goes all the way from research and development through engineering, procurement, construction, and our in-house program management and project controls. This really allows us to have ownership of our own design, of our own scale-up, how we manage our own tradecraft, and having this in-house is really how you avoid not having transparency into your own costs and into your own timeline. Much of our team has many years of experience designing and constructing and operating very large gigafactories that gives us the experience to help move these projects forward. It's also important that we have right-sized this first battery recycling facility for the current state of the battery recycling market. I mentioned there are over 20 battery gigafactories under construction in the U.S. right now. These tend to be between 30 and 50 gigawatt hours per year of capacity. And recycling or manufacturing facilities that size tend to make between 20 and 40,000 tons per year of waste per facility. So we've designed our first plant with a 20,000 ton per year throughput, which means just the waste from a single gigafactory is enough to supply this first plant. As we move forward in our co-located fashion, we will likely build facilities that are much larger, that are size based on our co-located partners. But it's an important attribute to not have built an extremely large plant that would now have difficulty being fed. Also, being able to move directly into this facility we purchased in TRIC. The facility we purchased allows a space to build both our first phase, our demanufacturing system, and our second phase, our hydrometallurgy train in the same building. So we've already spent all the capital costs on that building and the infrastructure and for all of phase one. So over the coming months, we will be purchasing equipment for the second phase of the process. However, all the capital expense of the building and infrastructure is already behind us.
Staying with the topic of recycling a little bit, we've had a few questions regarding feedstock. So the next question is, where is the majority of the feedstock for our recycling facility currently coming from?
Yes, thank you. We have three different avenues right now, three primary avenues of how we source feed. The first is that we have our own in-house team that are scouting on a daily basis about how we move forward, how we go for individual lots of material with different types of regional sources. This is a very big effort within the company. We've been able to source large amounts of material through this method, and the in-house team is constantly working with prospective partners about how to source material. Secondly, we mentioned the agreement we've signed with BASF, which allows us to source material from them and from their customers, provides large amounts of material from each of those facilities that we're able to process in our own plant. And third, we've been fortunate enough to go through several rounds with many of the very large automakers and cell manufacturers and cathode refiners. Each of them have formal bid processes for material. Each of those lots tends to be thousands of tons of material each, and we're currently going through each of those operations. When working with those strategics, the vast majority of the time those types of contracts are confidential, but there's large amounts of material available in the U.S. that we're going through the process of securing right now.
Thank you, Ryan. Consolidating several questions we've received related to our Fernley facility, here's our next question. The company was initially constructing a facility in Fernley, Nevada for its battery recycling operations, and then pivoted to installing its equipment in the TRIC facility, the Tahoe Regional facility. Why was this decision made, and what are the plans for the Fernley facility?
Yes, great question. As mentioned, the availability of the TRIC facility is something that wasn't planned. It came up for market relatively quickly. And because it was already constructed, already had the required infrastructure, was already vacant, and was designed for a similar process, it was a very large savings in timed operations and in cost for us to move from constructing the Fernley plant to be able to directly move into the TRIC plant. So getting this first recycling plant operational is extremely critical to the company. Since the spring, that has been the number one priority that we've been working on. So it's been important that all resources are devoted to installing the equipment and commissioning and now to operating that plant. The Fernley facility has been on pause since the spring. There's very little maintenance costs or carrying costs to really keep the Fernley plant where it is. As the construction wasn't completed, there wouldn't be a great value if we were to sell that property now, since it's a non-completed building without a certificate of occupancy. So for the near term, we're going to continue to devote resources towards ramping up the TRIC plant while we have the Fernley plant on pause. As we build up the TRIC facility, the intention is to then complete construction of the Fernley plant, and then we will be able to install additional recycling lines in that Fernley plant as we're able to. We'll continue to assess market conditions during that time to see if a sale is advantageous to the company. But as of now, we plan to keep it on pause and to devote additional resources to it to complete construction once we have the TRIC plant at full throughput.
Switching gears a bit, here's our next question. The federal government recently put out updated rulings with regards to how sections of the IRA are interpreted and which materials are eligible for subsidies. How do these updated rulings affect ABTC's business?
Yes, in the short term, it doesn't change any of our business or technology roadmaps. We're still moving in the same direction. But the clarification from the federal government on these foreign entities of concern and their involvement with the IRA-based funding is great to have clarification on. Essentially, it says that the federal government is maintaining its approach that they want to support the domestic manufacturing of critical materials. And there are restrictions on subsidies for companies and consumers if their products are sourced from components or materials from these foreign entities of concern. I think the important takeaway is that this has further reinforced with automakers that in order to continue to gain access to these subsidies, they need to prioritize sourcing these materials domestically. Just in a few weeks, on January 1st, many automakers have already announced that they will lose or have reduced subsidies for the electric vehicles they sell because they don't source enough materials and components from domestic sources. With these over 20 gigafactories coming online again, and very few critical material manufacturing facilities come online during the same time frame, there is a dramatic increase in demand for U.S.-based critical materials and very limited increase in supply for these materials. So this is very fortuitous for ABTC as we bring on our two facilities that can make these types of critical materials to make sure that we continue to satisfy these obligations.
Our next question is specifically with respect to the government grants. How much of each grant has been allocated to ABTC versus that allocated to its partners or co-grantees in those grants? And then second part of that question, how much of the grant has actually been received and how is it being disclosed in financial statements?
For the recent government grants we've won, we've been the prime recipient for all three. So it means that we led the application process. For each of them, we did bring on partners and sub-recipients. But for each of the three grants, the vast majority of the funding is directly for ABTC. The way the grants work is that at the proposal stage, we write a full multi-year project plan with milestones and targets, a budget by year for the total project, and if that proposal is selected and contracted for a grant, essentially the rate at which we receive the funds is the rate at which we propose them within the application itself. So for our lithium refinery grant last year, that's a 5-year project. The advanced battery recycling one is a 3-year project. And the funds are dispersed on a monthly basis based on the budget that we wrote ourselves during the proposal stage. So they're spaced out based on really covering the cost of a lot of our personnel, a lot of our labor hours, a lot of the equipment we purchase, and a lot of the services that we select for the construction of our projects. The way that they're located in our financial statements is shown as essentially contra expenses to many of our components, as well as listed as other income within the different portions of the financial statements. But really the funds are distributed over time, and the 2 recent grants, one started September 1st, another one started October 1st. So we're really just ramping up operations of those. And while we did get selected for those awards last fall, through these much larger programs, it did take many months to go through contracting and negotiations. And it's just over the past few months that those grants were actually contracted and that we've now started receiving funds. So in this quarter and ones going forward, you will start to see the impact of receiving those funds. And again, going through that contracting process was not trivial. Several of our co-selectees were not able to go through the process, had their grant selections outright canceled, or over a year later are still trying to go through negotiations. So this is a big strength of our in-house team about how we've been able to work through this project management, this accounting, and the work with the federal government to make sure that even once we're selected, we also have the in-house abilities to move the contracts forward and to then move the projects themselves forward.
All right, Ryan, this is our final question. The company has published partial results of the 3rd drill program for the Tonopah Flats lithium project. When will the remaining data be published, and what are the next steps on the project?
Yes, we published the summary data for the first 6 holes on that program. We've now received all of the data for all 8 holes, and we're integrating that into an updated resource report. So in the coming weeks, we'll be publishing the preliminary economic analysis, as it's referred to in the Canadian standard. In the US SEC standard, it's referred to as an IA, an initial assessment. That really shows the financial competitiveness of our system. That initial report will be based on the first 2 drill programs and the resource report we put out back in the spring. Shortly after we publish that PEA, we'll then be issuing an updated report that includes all the data from the 3rd drill program itself. So again, the infill plus step-out drilling, our goal is to both increase the resource size and the classification of the material, at which time we'll also update the financial competitiveness of the project itself. Going through these drill programs and updating both the resource reports and the economic assessments are very important. But when we speak with our prospective customers of this product, they say it's equally important to have lab studies and reports is to have actual operating integrated pilot plants that really show this product being made at meaningful scale. So again, we've received all the equipment for the integrated pilot plant, and over the next few months, we'll be installing and commissioning that facility. So in order to sign these long-term offtakes, those are really the last 2 pieces that are needed, is to be able to show the economic competitiveness of the process through the PEA and to have this operating integrated pilot plant in our facility over the coming months. So we're looking forward to finalizing the selection of who we'll partner with for the offtake of this very large amount of domestic battery-grade lithium hydroxide.
Thank you, Ryan.
Well, thank you everybody for your time today. This is the conclusion of the meeting. We really just wanted to say that we really appreciate the support of all of our shareholders. Over the past year, we really have moved from bench scale operations into commercial scale operations for both of our business units. This has been an extremely quick progression. We're very fortunate to have really ramped up internal operations as well. We have about tripled headcount of the company within the past year, while at the same time being very selective of who we bring in-house. It really isn't just about technical skill sets. We really do have an important culture within the company that allows all of those different groups to work together, and about how we're able to scale up so quickly with having these two very distinct business units under one umbrella. When we look back over the past year, we are very proud to have won these corporate awards. The partnership with BSF is very important to our path forward. They had many options of how to move forward, and we see a lot of opportunity about how we can grow together. Again, when we apply for these government grants, it's always a long shot to win them. We're very proud to have won the two that we did last fall. That program is through the bipartisan infrastructure law. And the two grants we won last year were through essentially the Battery Materials Program Part 1, which had just over $3 billion in allocation. About a month ago, the Battery Materials Program Part 2, with another $3.5 billion of allocation, was just announced. So there are many opportunities of how we can continue to grow these businesses and continue to scale. So we've now been manufacturing commercial scale quantities of recycled material to sell into the market, and we're going through commercial scale construction design for our lithium hydroxide refinery. So we're very excited to move beyond what many companies do as far as talking about these critical problems, and to actually address them with real product out the door that we're selling to our strategic partners. So again, we're very excited about the year ahead, and we appreciate the support of all of you, our shareholders. So thank you for joining today.
The meeting has now concluded. Thank you for joining, and have a pleasant day.